pregnant is one of the most profound experiences a human being can go through. It can feel exciting, harrowing, beautiful, painful, joyful, and anxiety-provoking. A colleague of mine once said that being pregnant is like holding your heart outside of your body. It can feel very vulnerable. In preparing to give birth, we often give a lot of attention to the actual birth process, for good reason, and setting up the nursery. But what about the other things that help you prepare physically, mentally, and emotionally for pregnancy, birth, and beyond? The Beyond Birth Prenatal Retreat, November 3rd, provides support, confidence, and community in pregnancy and beyond right here in Niagara, with speakers covering core strength pre- and postnatally, reducing pregnancy discomfort, feeding your baby, helping your baby sleep, and adapting to motherhood. This one-day retreat gives you a warm and welcoming day to connect, learn, and feel more prepared, physically, mentally, and emotionally. To learn more and to register, go to familysleep.ca/retreat. Welcome to the Baby Sleep Connection, a podcast that explores baby sleep and more through the lens of attachment and development. I'm your host, Heather Boyd. I'm a mom of 3, an occupational therapist, and a certified infant and family sleep specialist. If you are a tired parent who wants to support your baby's sleep holistically, keep listening as we delve into approaches that go well beyond the usual strategies of wake windows and bedtime routines. Your baby's sleep is connected with so much more. I'm your host, Heather Boyd, and this week is not going the way I expected. Usually I pre-record these before Thursday and then get it all edited and ready to go. But between an extra busy schedule this week and, to top it all off, sick kiddos in the house, things did not go according to schedule. And so I may be, for the first time, recording, editing, and publishing an episode all in one go. For anyone who has felt like they have too much on their plate, I know that you can relate to the challenge. So I did want to delve into something that came up in my group coaching program, the Confident and Connected Baby Sleep program. It has come up with other clients as well, but it's fresh on my mind because I think it is an issue that is worth paying attention to when you are feeling run down, ragged, and burnt out as a parent whose baby is not sleeping as well as you hope they did. And it is about cheating yourself out of wellness, some key pieces that are going to make parenting easier, even when the things that you don't have control over, and that's really key. There are some things we have control over and some things we don't. When the things we don't have control over are going haywire. One of those things can be our baby's sleep. And yes, I am a coach who supports parents in making sleep easier, but there are sometimes things we cannot do. We can't speed up development. We can't take away all the teething pain. We can't prevent all illnesses. We can't navigate perfectly any transitions or bumps in the road like daycare or transition back to work without it impacting sleep, because we can't make our babies sleep less vulnerable than it is. Sleep is easily interrupted in the first 3 years because baby brains aren't mature enough yet to have those adult sleep cycles that allow sleep to go well. And of course, I'm not even touching on many of you out there who as adults are also having trouble with sleep. So when we know that there are going to be bumps in the road, and sometimes these bumps are really big, there are still some things we have control over that I find clients often forget about or are not even aware that they have control over that can make the situation easier. And I'm calling it cheating yourself out of wellness because these are things that are totally, at least partially, within your control to make things better, but you're kind of cheating on them. You're not actually taking advantage of them. And so there are 3 things, and we're going to go through them one at a time. The first one is sleep. So many of the parents I work with are cheating themselves out of sleep. And it's not without a great deal of thought, because usually when we cheat ourselves out of sleep, which means there are opportunities for us to sleep or to get closer to what we need in our sleep bank, or to replenish some of the sleep that we haven't been getting because our babies are waking up every hour and needing support to fall asleep. So often there are these periods of the day or the evening especially where we can actually gain back some of the sleep that we need. Now, when parents are aware of this, it's still not always an easy sell, because Usually in the evenings, when you finally get your baby down to sleep, you are now looking to do all the things that you really wanted to do, or that you relish, or that fill your cup up in different ways. Sometimes that's scrolling through social media. Sometimes that's popping on Netflix, sitting with your spouse or partner. It could be cleaning the kitchen or catching up on the things that you feel a lot of pressure to do before you go to bed. And these are parents that are exhausted enough to reach out and book a call with me, which means they're really exhausted and sleep is not going well. And so I talk to parents often about the trade-off that they're making in whatever it is that they're choosing to do during that period of, again, usually at night, that period of time when their baby may be having the longest stretch of sleep they're going to have all night. And instead of putting that sleep in the bank for yourself, you are doing all these other things. And it can feel worth it because those other things seem really important. Connecting with your spouse, really important and valuable to maintain and build that relationship. A clean kitchen can feel psychologically way easier to handle than getting up and having a dirty kitchen and a big mess to deal with. But the value of an extra hour or two, or in some cases 3 extra hours of sleep, if you go to bed not too long after your baby goes to bed, or at a reasonable but early time for you, can make a huge difference in how you're feeling. And yes, there are going to be background noises today because of the sick kiddos. My mic seems to pick up everything. So if you're hearing some background noise, it's because we do have a bit more going on than we usually would when I'm recording. So in terms of your wellness and your sleep bank, I want you to reflect on whether you're cheating yourself out of sleep and how worthwhile, especially if you're focused on sleep being a challenge, which if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess it is, how worthwhile would a little bit of extra sleep be instead of these other things that you do? I am not going to tell you that sleep has to be on the top of your hierarchy, but it does have to make it to the list, and it should be on the top from time to time. Things might move around a little bit, but if your sleep is never, ever near the top of that to-do list in the evening, and you are underestimating the importance of a little bit of extra sleep for you on how you're going to manage the messes and the bumps in the road the next day and be able to wake up with just a little less sleep debt than you did the day before, I want you to consider setting aside the expectations you have about partner time or cleaning the kitchen or catching up on email, to figure out a way at least once a week to bank some of that sleep in that evening. Pay attention to how that makes you feel, because it is hard to change habits, and our habits are not about going to bed early as parents unless we literally can't keep our eyes open. And even then, we're pretty good at fighting it. So consider the value that it could have and the difference it can make to you. And once you've reflected on that, then consider actually taking the next step and banking some of that sleep for yourself. That may involve calling in some backup. If the sleep routine necessitates you being awake and responding, then figuring out, is there a way that your partner or spouse could step in for part of this? Is there a way that you can go to bed early so that that longest stretch is most maximized for your own sleep? And so the next step is taking the action to do that, and then pay attention to how different you feel the next day with a little bit of extra sleep. The one other piece I will say to that is this is not forever. And I think that's a big holdup for parents who are not wanting to trade in their other priorities for sleep in the evening. Especially if it means the one time of day you get to sit down with your spouse, but I'm telling you, go to bed. And you're like, yeah, but this is important. Yes, it's important. But can you know that this is temporary? Bank some of that sleep so that you have more resilience, more energy, more patience, and generally a better health overall, including your immune system for fighting any of the bugs that are starting to circulate more now that the weather is cooler here in this hemisphere. So that's the first one. And if you are still listening and you haven't thrown your phone across the room because you're like, that's poppycock, I'm not doing that. I need to do stuff in the evening, or I value it too much. Maybe just let the idea settle a little bit and think about, what value could that bring you? A little bit of extra sleep. My second point is whether you're cheating yourself out of rest. And in my interview with Dr. Narina, if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen. I don't know what episode it is, but I'll leave it in the notes. She talks about ditching the word sleep altogether and focusing on rest. I'm actually going to distinguish between the two at this point and look at all the running around that we do during the day to go, 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 do. We are human beings, not human doings. So how can you be present in your certain circumstances, in the environment you're in, without constantly feeling like you're being chased by a tiger or constantly trying to catch up? Are there moments in the day where a pause or reflecting and getting into your body and being aware of where you are and how you feel? Or is there a time of day that you can simply sit and sit on a couch, sit on the floor cross-legged, close your eyes and do some deep breaths? If you meditate, if you use a mantra, something that slows you down from the constant rush that we tend to get in. When we're rushing, it's often because we're feeling so much pressure to get more done in a day than we can. And goodness, if there's any, phase of the lifespan where we're trying to get more done, it's often when we're parents of very young children, because there always seems to be much more on our plate than we could possibly get done. Rushing through all of this, rushing through your day, rushing and going is not going to get you ahead. You are on an escalator that is heading down and you're trying to go up faster than it's going down, and it's leaving you burnt out and exhausted, maybe even a little resentful. And so find these little, I'm going to call them little micro moments, little micro moments of rest. It can be as short as stepping out your front door and looking up at the sky, at the clouds, just for a moment before you move back into rushing with all the diaper bags and all the stuff that you're trying to get into the car with the baby car seat and the whole bit. It could be pausing while you're rinsing out the bottle at the sink to just feel the temperature of the water running over your hands. It could also be just pausing to make eye contact with whoever is with you. And I'll share honestly that sometimes when I get rushing, I realize I'm talking to the kids and talking to my spouse without ever slowing down enough to orient my body towards them and make eye contact. On those busy days, it's something that I have to slow down and be conscious about. Maybe that doesn't count as your conventional definition of rest, but when we know how important relationships are to our nervous system, and we know that pausing to connect with someone, whether it's a hand on the shoulder or a kiss or eye contact or a little cuddle or a tickle, these connections support our nervous systems in really positive ways. So look for the moments of rest. The third and last point I want to make today is about whether you're cheating yourself out of support. Now, this could be a whole topic on its own, and I do plan on having someone on where we can talk about the importance of the support system that we have around families, especially during vulnerable times, during pregnancy, during the early years when the demand is high, the support tends to be lower than humans have ever had in history, generally from a cultural perspective. And when we look in the past of how societies were formed and the culture of support, and specifically in North America, I think it's a challenge. I think it apparently, from what I've read, when you interview families from other countries outside of North America, some of them are shocked to find out how little support that we have as very, very exhausted, burnt out parents with very young families. And so when you cheat yourself out of support, it's because you are so focused on just getting it done, again, being a human doer instead of a human being. And we don't even take the time to look around at where the support is. Where are the people that can help us? Who are the people who have offered you help and you've turned it down because you feel uncomfortable asking for help? You feel too vulnerable. You feel like you're supposed to be able to handle all of this yourself. And so you actually don't even pay attention to saying yes. Now, I do improv as one of my hobbies, and one of the principles of improv is to say yes. If someone has an idea, the first thing you do is say yes, and you run with it. And I want to apply this to getting support too, because our inclination in this very independent driven society is to say no. It's like a knee-jerk no. And I want to slow this down enough for you to kind of reframe your automatic response and start looking at ways to say yes. Now, it involves a lot of discomfort because of how driven most of us are around independence and wanting to be competent and wanting to handle it, not wanting to trouble anyone, feeling uncomfortable about the dynamic, and not having any boundaries, not having those ways of shoring ourselves in and having clear expectations and clear communication so that the relationship can be built on trust and respect and clarity. I'll bring up Brene Brown because I often do. She talks about clear is kind and unclear is unkind. So if you're one of those parents who is very reluctant to ask for help and you worry about whether the help you're going to get is actually what you need, be really clear about what you need. That doesn't mean you're not compassionate or grateful or flexible. It just means that you know what would make the biggest difference for you. And actually, I want to talk about that a little bit more too and unpack it. So often we get this idea of what we want help with, and we haven't given thought to what is going to make the biggest difference for us right now. So in addition to reflecting on whether you're cheating yourself out of sleep and whether you're cheating yourself out of rest, I want you to start looking around for those moments you cheat yourself out of support because you want to control it all or you don't want to feel uncomfortable and you haven't figured out how to have boundaries. We could have a whole episode on boundaries, and I have a guest coming up that I'm interviewing at the end of the month that I'm excited to get recorded, and I know we're going to be talking about boundaries with Lisa Carpenter, so you can look forward to that episode sometime this fall. Until then, look at the ways that you can be really clear with what your needs are, and I will say that starts with being really clear with yourself and then being able to communicate it to those around you. As Fred Rogers says, look for the helpers. When there are tough times, there's always helpers somewhere. Those helpers aren't perfect. They are human just like us. This is a dynamic relationship that can be developed to get support. It can be from your partner, your spouse, your sister, your sister-in-law, your parents, your in-laws, a neighbor, or a friend who either doesn't have kids but seems to have tapped into this being a really challenging phase of humanhood. Or it could be someone who's a little bit ahead in the parenting curve. I know I've told the story before of meeting a mom and her baby in a baby yoga class, and she started inviting me over for coffee. And I can't tell you what a lifeline that was in those early months when I was isolated and alone with a baby who wasn't sleeping, and for the first time in my life being stuck at home, like really not having a sense of what my role was and how I could feel fulfilled and organized and have a sense of direction at all. And I would, in some weeks, go to her apartment. It must have been 3 times a week. I would walk or take the streetcar, anything to get through that door with my baby where she had coffee already brewing and my baby could be laid down on the floor and I could step back to look at him. And this is something that came up this week in the group coaching call too. So often when we're isolated and alone with our babies, we're so close to them all the time that we don't actually see them as a whole. They're part of us in so many ways. And I think back to those days when I would visit my friend and lay my baby down next to her baby and step back and be able to see literally my whole baby, like as a whole little human being on the floor, figuring out how to roll or pick up a toy or notice the baby next to him. And it really helped me change my perspective on my baby as a human being. Yes, they are so much a part of us, but growing up and developing is about slowly separating and getting autonomy and developing into their own individual, unique person. And to be able to step away, I needed someone there to engage me. I had conversation, I had coffee, repeat, I had coffee, and I had perspective because of that support. I couldn't have written a script for what support I needed, but when I found it, it felt so right. So I want to just pull that all together so that you can kind of take these three pieces with you and start reflecting on where you might be cheating yourself out of any of these three. And the first is sleep, the second is rest, and the third is support. And I would love, if you're listening to this episode and this resonates, send me an email. Let me know what stood out for you, or comment below if there's a comment. I think there's comments allowed on these podcasts. I think I ticked that box. I would love to hear from you what stood out for you and what way either resonates with you as like an aha moment, or what have you already done that fits in with these three? Or have I missed something and left something out that you think is just as valuable to add to this list? Until next time, have a wonderful day, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I do hope that you found the information and perspectives in this podcast episode helpful to you as you navigate your baby's sleep development. Of course, this podcast provides general information, and it isn't tailored to your family's reality or the specific needs of your baby. If you're concerned about your baby's sleep or health, be sure to reach out to your healthcare provider. If you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and you need a place to feel nurtured and reassured, you can find me on Instagram at familysleep.ca. Until next episode, look for the connections that support you and your baby.